Veganism. Veganism is the practice of abstaining from the use of animal products, particularly in the diet, and associated philosophy that rejects the commodity status of animals. An individual who follows the diet or philosophy is known as a vegan. Distinctions may be made between several categories of veganism. Dietary vegans, also known as strict vegetarians, refrain from consuming meat, eggs, dairy products, and any other animal-derived substances. An ethical vegan is someone who does not only follow a plant-based diet, but extends the philosophy into other areas of their lives, opposes the use of animals for any purpose, and tries to avoid any cruelty and exploitation of all animals, including humans. Another term is environmental veganism, which refers to the avoidance of animal products on the premise that the industrial farming of animals is environmentally damaging and unsustainable. What the hell? Well-planned vegan diets are regarded as appropriate for all stages of life, including infancy and pregnancy, as said by the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, as well as the Australian National Health and Medical Research Council, the British Dietetic Association, Dietitians of Canada, the New Zealand Ministry of Health, and the Italian Society of Human Nutrition. The German Society for Nutrition, which is a non-profit organization and not an official health agency, does not recommend vegan diets for children or adolescents or during pregnancy and breastfeeding. There is inconsistent evidence for vegan diets providing a protective effect against metabolic syndrome. But some evidence suggests that a vegan diet can help with weight loss, especially in the short term. Vegan diets tend to be higher in dietary fiber, magnesium, folic acid, vitamin C, vitamin E, iron, and phytochemicals, and lower in dietary energy, saturated fat, cholesterol, omega-3 fatty acid, vitamin D, calcium, zinc, and vitamin B12. A poorly planned vegan diet may lead to nutritional deficiencies that nullify any beneficial effects and may cause serious health issues, some of which can only be prevented with fortified foods or dietary supplements. Vitamin B12 supplementation is important because its deficiency can cause blood disorders and potentially irreversible neurological damage. This danger is also one of the most common in poorly planned non-vegan diets. A little bit of a comparison. Semi-vegetarianism, polotarianism, eat maybe dairy, ovo-lacto, yeah, who cares? The word vegan was coined by Donald Watson and his then future wife Dorothy Morgan in 1944. Interest in veganism increased significantly in the 2010s. Etymology. The term vegetarian has been used since around 1839 to refer what was previously described as a vegetable regiment or diet. Its origin is an irregular compound of vegetable and the suffix "arian" in the sense of supporter or believer in, as in humanitarian. The earliest known written use is attributed to actress, writer, and abolitionist Fanny Kemble in her journal of a residence on a Gregorian plantation in 1838 to 1839. Vegetarianism can be traced to Indus Valley civilization in 3300 to 1300 BCE in the Indian subcontinent, particularly in the northern and western ancient India. Early vegetarians included Indian philosophers such as Parshvanatha Mahariva, probably going to pronounce some of these wrong, Acharya Kundakanda, Usmaswati Samantha Bharata, and the Tamil poet Valunva. Anyway, the Indian emperors Chandragupta Maurya and Ashoka, the Greek philosophers such as Empedocles and Theophrastus, Plutarch, Plotinus, and Porphyry, and the Roman poet Ovid, and the playwright Seneca the Younger, the Greek sage Pythagoras, may have advocated an early form of strict vegetarianism, but his life... Okay, this is just Pythagoras, but his life is so obscure that it is disputed whether he ever advocated for any vegetarianism at all. He almost certainly prohibited his followers from eating beans, that's weird, and from wearing woolen garments. Okay. Eudoxus of Cnisus, a student of Heraclitus and Plato, writes that Pythagoras was distinguished by such purity and so avoided killing and killers that he was not only abstained from animal foods but even kept his distance from cooks and hunters. One of the earliest known vegans was Arab poet al-Ma'araki, circa 973 to 1057. Their arguments were based on health and transmigration of souls, animal welfare, and the view espoused by Porphyry in De Abstinentia ab Isu Animalium on abstinence from animal food, circa 268 to 270, that if humans deserve justice, then so do animals. Vegetarianism established itself as a significant movement in the 19th century Britain and United States. A minority of vegetarians avoided animal food entirely. In 1813, the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley published A Vindication of Natural Diet, advocating abstinence from animal food and spirituous liqueurs. And in 1815, William Lamb, a London physician, stated that his water and vegetable diet could cure anything from tuberculosis to acne. Lamb called animal food habitual irritation and argued that meat, milk eating and flesh eating are but branches of a common system and that they must stand or fall together. Sylvester Graham's meatless Graham diet, mostly fruit, vegetables, water and bread made at home with stone ground flour, became popular as a health remedy in the 1830s in the United States. Several vegan communities were established around this time. In Massachusetts, Amos Bronson Alcott, father of the novelist Louisa May Alcott, opened the Temple School in 1834 and Fruitlands in 1844. And in England, James Pierrepont Greaves founded the Concordium, a vegan community at Alcott House on Ham Common in 1838. Okay, the Vegetarian Society. In 1843, members of Alcott House created the British and Foreign Society for the Promotion of Humanity and Abstinence from Animal Food, led by Sophia Chichester, a wealthy benefactor of Alcott House. The Alcott House also helped to establish the UK Vegetarian Society, which held its first meeting in 1847 in Ramsgate, Kent. The Medical Times and Gazette in London reported in 1884 there are two kinds of vegetarians. One, an extreme form, the members of which eat no animal products whatsoever, and a less extreme sect who do not object to eggs, milk, or fish. Vegetarian Society belongs to the latter, more moderate division. Okay. Mahatma Gandhi attended the Vegetarian Society in London in 20th November 1931. Okay. An article in Society's magazine, The Vegetarian Messenger, in 1851 discussed alternatives to shoe leather, which suggest the presence of vegans within the membership who rejected animal use entirely, not only in diet. By the 1886 publication of Henry Salt's A Plea for Vegetarianism and Other Essays, he asserts that it is quite true that most, not all, food reformers admit into their diet such animal food as milk, butter, eggs, and cheese. Russell Thatcher Troll, the Hygiene Home Cook book published in 1874, is the first known vegan cookbook in America. The book contains recipes without the employment of milk, sugar, salt, yeast, acids, alkalis, grease, or condiments of any kind, An early vegan cookbook, Rupert H. Wheeldon's No Animal Food, 2 Essays and 100 Recipes, was published by C.W. Daniel in 1910. The consumption of milk and eggs became a battleground over the following decades. There were regular discussions about it in Vegetarian Messenger. It appears from the correspondence page that many opponents of veganism came from vegetarians. Okay. During a visit to London in 1931, Mahatma Gandhi, who had joined the Vegetarian Society's executive committee when he lived in London from 1888 to 1891, gave a speech to the society arguing that it ought to promote a meat-free diet as a matter of morality, not health. Lacto-vegetarians acknowledged the ethical consistency of the vegan position, but regarded a vegan diet as impracticable and were concerned that it might be an impediment to spreading vegetarianism if vegans found themselves unable to participate in social circles where no animal food was available. This became the predominant view of the Vegetarian Society, which in 1935 stated the lacto-vegetarians on the whole do not defend the practice of consuming the dairy products except on the ground of expediency. Okay. So in August 1944, several members of the Vegetarian Society asked that a section of its newsletter be devoted to non-dairy vegetarianism. When the request was turned down, Donald Watson, secretary of the Leicester branch, set up a new quarterly newsletter in November 1944, priced twopence. He called it the Vegan News. The word vegan was invented by Watson and Dorothy Morgan, a schoolteacher he would later marry. The word is based on the first 3 and the last 2 letters of vegetarian because it marked, in Mr. Watson's words, the beginning and end of vegetarian. The Vegan News asked its readers if they could think of anything better than vegan to stand for non-dairy vegetarian. They suggested Alvega, neo-vegetarian, dairy ban, Vitan, Benevore, Sanivore, and Beaumorger. The first edition attracted more than 100 letters, including from George Bernard Shaw, who resolved to give up eggs and dairy. The new Vegan Society held its first meeting in early November at the Attic Club, 144 High, Holborn, London. Those in attendance were Donald Watson, Elise B. Shergley, Fay F. Henderson, Alfred High Hafferden, Paul Spencer, Bernard Drake with Minnie Papiluia, Barbara Moore, a Russian-British engineer. I got at least one of those names wrong. World Vegan Day is held every 1st of November to mark the founding of the Society, and the month of November is considered by the Society to be World Vegan Month. Cool. The Vegan News changed its name to The Vegan in November 1945, by which time it had 500 subscribers. It published recipes and a false trade. Where did I get that? It published recipes and a vegan trade list of animal-free products such as toothpaste, shoe polish, stationery, and glue. Vegan books appeared, including Vegan Recipes by Fay F. Henderson in 1946 and Aids to a Vegan Diet for Children by Kathleen V. Mayo in 1948. The Vegan Society soon made it clear that it rejected the use of animals for any purpose, not only in diet. In 1947, Watson wrote, "The vegan renounces it as superstitious that human life depends upon the exploitation of these creatures whose feelings are much the same as our own." From 1948, the Vegan's front page read, "Advocating living without exploitation," and in 1951, the Society published its definition of veganism as the doctrine that man should live without exploiting animals. In 1956, its vice president, Leslie Cross, founded the Plant Milk Society, and in 1965, the Plant Milk Limited and later Plamil Foods. It began production of one of the first widely distributed soy milks in the Western world. Nice. The first vegan society in the United States was founded in 1948 by Catherine Nimmo and Ruben Abramowitz in California, probably got that wrong, who distributed Watson's newsletter. In 1960, H.J. Dinshaw founded the American Vegan Society, AVS, linking veganism to the concept of ahimsa, or non-harming in Sanskrit. According to Joanne Stepanek, the word vegan was first published independently in 1962 by the Oxford Illustrated Dictionary, defined as a vegetarian who eats no butter, eggs, cheese, or milk. Okay, so since 1988, the Vegan Society defines veganism as follows. Veganism is a philosophy and a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, and by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefits of animals, humans, and the environment. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals. Okay. The European Commission was granted the right to adopt an implementing act on food information related to suitability of food for vegans by the European Parliament and the Council of European Union in Article 36 of Regulation EU number 1169/2011. The German Consumer Protection Minister Conference approved a definition for foods suitable for vegans on the 22nd of April 2016. The European Vegetarian Union adopted a text for the proposal of a legally binding definition based on Regulation EU number 1169/2011 in July 2019. In 2021, the International Organization for Standardization published standard ISO 23662 on definitions and technical criteria for foods and food ingredients suitable for vegetarians and vegans, and for labeling and claims. Increasing interest. Alternative food movements. In the 1960s and 70s, a vegetarian food movement emerged as part of the counterculture in the United States that focused on concerns about diet and the environment, and a distrust of food producers, leading to increasing interest in organic gardening. One of the most influential vegetarian books of that time was Francis Moore Lapay's 1971 text, Diet for a Small Planet. It sold more than 3 million copies and suggested getting off the top of the food chain. The following decade saw research by a group of scientists and doctors in the United States, including physicians Dean Ornish, Cadwell Esselstyn, Neil D. Barnard, John A. McDougall, Michael Greger, and biochemist T. Colin Campbell, who argued that diets based on animal fat and animal protein, such as the Western pattern diet, were detrimental to health. They produced a series of books that recommend vegan or vegetarian diets, including McDougall's The McDougall Plan, 1983, John Robinson's Diet for Neuroamerica, 1987, which associated meat eating with environmental damage, and Dr. Dean Ornish's Program for Reversing Heart Disease in 1990. In 2003, two major North American dietitians associations indicated that well-planned vegan diets were suitable for all stages of life. This was followed by the film Earthlings, 2005, Campbell's The China Study, 2005, Rory Friedman and Kim Barnuin's Skinny Bitch in 2005. I've actually read some of that. Jonathan Safran Foer's Eating Animals, 2009, and the film Forks Over Knives, 2011. Back in the 1980s, veganism became associated with punk subculture and ideologies, particularly straight-edge, hardcore punk in the United States, and anarcho-punk in the United Kingdom. This association continues on into the 21st century as evinced. I feel like that should be evidenced, but who am I to say what it should be? As evinced by the prominence of vegan punk events such as Fluff Fest in Europe. Cool. Alright, so into the mainstream. vegan diet became increasingly mainstream in the 2010s, especially in the latter half. The Economist declared 2019 the year of the vegan. Chain restaurants began marking vegan items in their menus, and supermarkets improved their selection of vegan processed food. The global mock meat market increased by 18% between 2005 and 2010, and in the United States by 8% between 2012 and 2015 to 553 million a year. The vegetarian butcher, der Vegetarischlager, probably not how you say that, the first known vegetarian butcher shop selling mock meats opened in the Netherlands in 2010, while America's first vegan butcher, the herbivorous butcher, opened in Minneapolis in 2016. Since 2017, more than 12,500 chain restaurant locations have begun offering Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods products, including Carl Jr. outlets offering Beyond Burgers and Burger King outlets serving Impossible Whoppers. Plant-based meat sales in the US grew 37% between 2017 and 2019. In 2011, Europe's first vegan supermarkets appeared in Germany, Vegans in Berlin and Vegelicious in Dortmund. In 2013, Oktoberfest in Munich, traditionally a meat-heavy event, offered vegan dishes for the first time in its 200-year history. By 2016, 49% of Americans were drinking plant milk and 91% still drank dairy milk. In the United Kingdom, the plant milk market increased by 155% in 2 years, from 36 million litres or 63 million imperial pints in 2011 to 92 million or 162 million imperial pints in 2013. There was a 185% increase in new vegan products between 2012 and 2016 in the UK. In 2017, the United States School Nutrition Association found 14% of school districts across the country were serving vegan school meals, compared to 11.5% of schools offering vegan lunch in 2016, reflecting a change happening in many parts of the world, including Brazil and England. In total, as of 2016, the largest share of vegan consumers globally currently reside in Asia Pacific, with 9% of people following a vegan diet. Ooh. In 2017, veganism rose in popularity in Hong Kong and China, particularly among millennials, defined as Generation Y or Z. China's vegan market was estimated to rise more than 17% between 2015 and 2020, which is expected to be the fastest growth rate internationally in that period. This exceeds the projected growth in the second and third fastest growing vegan markets internationally in the same period, the United Arab Emirates 10.6% and Australia 9.6% respectively. In 2018, the book The End of Animal Farming by J.C. Rees Anthis argued that veganism will completely replace animal products by 2100. The book was featured in The Guardian, The New Republic, and Forbes, among other newspapers and magazines. The growth of schools serving vegan school meals has increased in recent years, with the lunches added by Los Angeles, California in 2018, Portland, Maine in 2019, and New York City in 2022. Veganuary is a UK-based non-profit organization that educates and encourages people around the world to try a vegan diet for the month of January. Veganuary also refers to the month-long challenge itself. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the origin of which is widely agreed to be the consumption of bats, not sure about that one, over 100, just because I read this out doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it. Over 100 British celebrities, including John Bishop, Ricky Gervais, Jane Goodall, Johnny Marr, Deborah Meaden, and Paul McCartney signed a joint letter alongside various politicians and non-government organizations calling on people to join the fight against climate change and prevent future pandemics through changing to a plant-based diet, starting with signing up for Veganuary. In January 2021, 582,538 people from 209 countries and territories signed up for Veganuary, breaking the previous year's record of 400,000. That same month, ONA, a vegan restaurant in Arras, France, became the first vegan restaurant in the country to receive a Michelin star. Throughout the year, a further 79 plant-based restaurants around the world received Michelin stars. At the end of the year, a poll conducted by The Guardian showed that a new high of 36% of the British public were interested in veganism. Prevalence by country. Okay. Australians topped Google's worldwide searches for the word vegan between mid-2015 and mid-2016. A Euromonitor international study concluded the market for packaged vegan food in Australia would rise 9.6% per year between 2015 and 2020, making Australia the third fastest growing vegan market behind China and the United Arab Emirates. Austria. In 2013, Courier estimated that 0.5% of Austrians practice veganism, and in the capital, Vienna, 0.7%. Belgium. In a 2016 iVox online study found that out of 1,000 Dutch-speaking residents of Flanders and Brussels of 18 years and over, 0.3% were vegan. Brazil, according to the research by IBOPE Intelligentsia, published in April 2018, 14% of Brazilians, or about 30 million people, considered themselves vegetarians, 7 million of them vegans. Canada. In 2018, one survey estimated that 2.1% of adult Canadians considered themselves as vegan. Germany, a government-commissioned survey indicates that as of 2021, 2% of German residents follow a vegan diet, with higher incidence rates among the younger, the less educated people who ended their formal education with Hauptschule graduation, and residents of former West Germany. India. In the 2005 to 2006 National Health Survey, 1.6% of the surveyed population reported never consuming animal products. Veganism was the most common in the states of Gujarat, 4.9%, and Maharashtra, 4%. Probably didn't say that right. Israel, 5%, approximately 300,000 in Israel said they were vegan in 2014, making it the highest per capita vegan population in the world. A 2015 survey by Globes and Israel's Channel 2 News similarly found 5% of Israelis were vegan. Veganism increased among Israeli Arabs. The Israeli army made special provision for vegan soldiers in 2015, which included providing non-leather boots and wool-free berets. Veganism also simplifies adherence to the Judaic prohibition on combining meat and milk in meals. Between 0.6 and 3% of Italians were reported to be vegans as of 2015. In 2018, the Dutch Society for Veganism, Netherlands Vereniging voor Veganisme, NVV, estimated there were more than 100,000 Dutch vegans, 0.59%, based on their membership growth. In 2020, the NVV estimated the number of vegans in the Netherlands at 150,000. At 150,000. That is approximately 0.9% of the Dutch population. Followers of the Romanian Orthodox Church keep fast during several periods throughout the ecclesiastical calendar, amounting to a majority of the year. In the Romanian Orthodox tradition, devotees abstain from eating any animal products during these times. As a result, vegan food is abundant in stores and restaurants. However, Romanians may not be familiar with a vegan diet as a full-time lifestyle choice. Sweden, 4% said they were vegan in a 2014 Demoscopol market research company Demoscope estimated in 2017 that 3% of the population was vegan. That was Switzerland, United Kingdom. A 2016 IPSOS MORI study commissioned by the Vegan Society, surveying almost 10,000 people aged 15 or over across England, Scotland and Wales, found that 1.05% were vegan. The Vegan Society estimates that 542,000 in the UK follow a vegan diet. According to a 2018 survey by CompareTheMarket.com, the number of people who identify as vegan in the United Kingdom has risen to over 3.5 million, which is approximately 7% of the population. And environmental concerns were a major factor for this development. However, doubt was cast on this inflated figure by the UK-based Vegan Society, who performed their own regular survey. The Vegan Society themselves found that in 2018 there were 600,000 vegans in Great Britain, or 1.16%, which was seen as a dramatic increase on previous figures. YouGov reported 3% vegans in 2021. United States. Estimates of vegans in the US in past varied from 2%, Gallup 2012, or 0.5% for Fornalytics in 2014. According to the latter, 70% of those who adopted a vegan diet abandoned it. However, Top Trends in Prepared Foods 2017, a report by Global Data, estimated that 6% of US consumers now claim to be vegan, from just 1% in 2014. In 2020, YouGov published results of a 2019 research, which showed only 2.26% reported being vegan. Nearly 59% of the vegan respondents were female. According to Gallup, Black Americans are 3 times more likely to be vegan and a vegetarian than whites as of July 2018, 9% compared to 3%. The city with the most vegan restaurants per resident in 2021, according to data collected from Happy Cow, was Chiang Mai, Thailand, followed by Ubud, Bali, Phuket in Thailand, Tel Aviv in Israel, and Lisbon in Portugal. Animal products. While vegans broadly abstain from animal products, there are many ways in which animal products are used, and different individuals and organizations that identify with the practice of veganism may use some limited animal products based on philosophy, means, or other concerns. Philosopher Gary Steiner argues that it is not possible to be entirely vegan because animal use and products are deeply and imperceptibly woven into the fabric of human society. Animal ingredients A to Z 2004, and Veganism A to Z 2013 list which ingredients might be animal derived. The British Vegan Society's sunflower logo and Peter's bunny logo mean the product is certified vegan, which includes no animal testing. The Leaping Bunny logo signals no animal testing, but it might not be vegan. The Vegan Society criteria for vegan certification are that the product contains no animal products and that neither the finished item nor the ingredients have been tested on animals by or on behalf of the manufacturer or by anyone over whom the manufacturer has control. Its website contains a list of certified products, as does Australia's Choose Cruelty Free (CCF). The British Vegan Society will certify a product only if it is free of animal involvement as far as possible and practical, including animal testing, but recognizes that it is not always possible to make a choice that avoids the use of animals, an issue that was highlighted in 2016 when it became known that the UK's newly introduced £5 note contained tallow. Tallow being beef fat, I assume. And so the British Vegan Society will certify a product only if it is free of animal involvement as far as possible and practical, including animal testing, but recognizes that it is not always possible to make a choice that avoids the use of animals, an issue that was highlighted in 2016 when it became known that the UK's newly introduced £5 note contained tallow, or beef fat. Like vegetarians, vegans do not eat meat, including beef, pork, poultry, fowl, game, animal, seafood. The main difference between a vegan and vegetarian diet is that vegans exclude dairy products and eggs. Ethical vegans avoid them on the premise that their production causes animal suffering and premature death. In egg production, most male chicks are culled because they do not lay eggs. Egg-laying hens also suffer from keel bone fractures due to being bred to produce disproportionately large eggs, with the largest study of its kind showing that 85% of Danish egg-laying hens suffer from keel bone fractures. To obtain milk from dairy cattle, cows are made pregnant to induce lactation. They are kept lactating for 3 to 7 years and then slaughtered. Female calves can be separated from their mothers within 24 hours of birth and fed milk replacer to retain the cow's milk for human consumption. Most male calves are slaughtered at birth, sent for veal production, or reared for beef. Clothing. Many clothing products may be made of animal products such as silk, wool, including lamb's wool, shearling, cashmere, Angora, and mohair, and a number of other fine wools, fur, feathers, pearls, animal-derived dyes, leather, snakeskin, or other kinds of skin or animal products. While dietary vegans might use animal products in clothing, toiletries, and similar, ethical veganism extends not only to matters of food, but also to the wearing or use of animal products and rejects the commodification of animals altogether. Most leather clothing is made from cows' skins. Some vegans regard the purchase of leather, particularly from cows, as financial support for the meat industry. Vegans may wear clothing items and accessories made from non-animal derived materials such as hemp, linen, cotton, canvas, polyester, artificial leather or pleather, rubber, and vinyl. Leather alternatives can come from materials such as cork, pinna from pineapples, cactus, and mushroom leather. Some vegan clothes, in particular leather alternatives, are made of petroleum-based products, which has triggered criticism because of the environmental damage involved in their production. Vegans replace personal care products and household cleaners containing animal products with products that are vegan. Animal ingredients are ubiquitous because they are relatively inexpensive. After animals are slaughtered for meat, the leftovers are put through a rendering process, and some of that material, particularly the fat, is used in toiletries. Common animal-derived ingredients include tallow in soap, collagen-derived glycerin, which used as a lubricant and humectant in many hair care products, moisturizers, shaving foams, soaps, and toothpastes. Lanolin from sheep's wool is often found in lip balm and moisturizers. Stearic acid is a common ingredient in face creams, shaving foams, and shampoos. As with glycerin, it can be a plant-based, but is usually animal-derived. Lactic acid, an alpha-hydroxy acid derived from animal milk, is used in moisturizers. Allantoin, major metabolic intermediate in most organisms, including mammals, plants, and bacteria. Okay. From the comfrey plant or cow's urine is found in shampoos, moisturizers, and toothpaste. And the carmine from scale insects, such as the female cochineal, is used in foods and cosmetics to produce red and pink shades. Beauty Without Cruelty, founded as a charity in 1959, was one of the earliest manufacturers and certifiers of animal-free personal care products. Insect products. Vegan groups disagree about insect products. Neither the Vegan Society nor the American Vegan Society considers honey, silk, and other insect products as suitable for vegans. Some vegans believe that exploiting the labor of bees and harvesting their energy source is immoral, and that commercial beekeeping operations can harm and even kill bees. Insect products can be defined much more widely as commercial bees are used to pollinate about 100 different food crops. Pet food, this section's factual accuracy is disputed. Due to the environmental impact of meat-based pet food and the ethical problems it poses for vegans, some vegans extend their philosophy to include the diets of pets. This is particularly true for domesticated cats and dogs, for which vegan pet food is both available and nutritionally complete, such as Veggie Pet. This practice has been met with caution and criticism, especially regarding vegan cat diets, because Felids, the group that includes cats, are obligate carnivores. Nutritionally complete vegan pet diets are comparable to meat-based ones for cats and dogs. A 2015 study found that 6 out of 24 commercial vegan pet food brands do not meet the Association of American Feed Control Officials AAFCO labeling regulations for amino acid adequacy. Other products and farming practices. A concern is the case of medications which are routinely tested on animals to ensure they are effective and safe, and may also contain animal ingredients such as lactose, gelatin, or stearates. There may be no alternatives to prescribed medication, or these alternatives may be unsuitable, less effective, or have more adverse side effects. Experimentation with laboratory animals is also used for evaluating the safety of vaccines, food additives, cosmetics, household products, workplace chemicals, and many other substances. Vegans may avoid certain vaccines, such as the flu vaccine, which is commonly produced in chicken eggs. An effective alternative, Flu Block, is widely available in the United States. Farming of fruits and vegetables may include fertilizing the soil with animal manure, even on organic farms, and possibly causing a concern to vegans for ethical or environmental reasons. Vegan or animal-free farming uses plant compost only. Vegan diets are based on grains and other seeds, legumes, particularly beans, fruit, vegetables, edible mushrooms, and nuts. Meat substitutes. Vegan meat alternatives. Oh, look at that. Are commonly sold in the form of vegetarian sausage, mince, and veggie burgers. They are often made from soybeans, seitan, which is wheat gluten, beans, lentils, rice, mushrooms, or vegetables. Meat substitutes have been made in China since at least the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 Common Era, including mock duck made from seitan. They are much newer to Western countries. Some famous Western producers of vegan meat alternatives include Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat. However, in the late 2010s, many meat producers and supermarkets also started making their own brands of vegan meat substitutes. Plant milk and dairy product alternatives. Plant milks such as soy milk, almond milk, cashew milk, grain milks like oat milk, flax milk, and rice milk, hemp milk, coconut milk are used in place of cow's or goat's milk. Soy milk provides around 7 grams of protein per cup, compared with 8 grams of protein per cup of cow's milk. Almond milk is lower in dietary energy, carbohydrates, and protein. Soy milk should not be used as a replacement for breast milk for babies. Babies who are not breastfed may be fed commercial infant formula, normally based on cow's milk or soy. The latter is known as soy-based infant formula, SBIF. Butter and margarine can be replaced with alternate vegan products. Vegan cheeses are made from seeds such as sesame and sunflower, nuts such as cashew, pine nut, and almond, and soybeans, coconut oil, nutritional yeast, tapioca, and rice, among other ingredients, and can replicate the meltability of dairy cheese. Nutritional yeast is a common substitute for the taste of cheese in vegan recipes. Cheese substitutes can be made at home, including from nuts such as cashews, Yogurt and cream products can be replaced with plant-based products such as soy yogurt. Various types of plant cream have been created to replace dairy cream, and some types of imitation whipped cream are non-dairy. In the 2010s and 2020s, a number of companies have genetically engineered yeast to produce cow milk proteins, whey, or fat without the use of cows. These include Perfect Day, Novacca, Motive Foodworks, Remilk, Final Foods, Imagine Dairy, Nourish Ingredients, and Circe. Cool. Yeah. Egg replacements. As of 2019, in the United States, there were numerous vegan egg substitutes available, including products used for scrambled eggs, cakes, cookies, and donuts. Baking powder, silken tofu, mashed potato, bananas, flax seeds, and aquafaba from chickpeas can also be used as egg substitutes. Which one of these works depends on the egg property the replacement is meant to emulate. Scrambled tofu, for instance, replaces scrambled eggs, but tofu does not act as a binding agent for cakes like raw eggs. Flax seeds or bananas do. Raw veganism. Raw veganism, combining veganism and raw foodism, excludes all animal products and food cooked above 48 degrees Celsius or 118 degrees Fahrenheit. A raw vegan diet includes vegetables, fruits, nuts, grains and legumes, sprouts, seeds and seed vegetables. There are many variations of the diet, including fruitarianism. Fruitarianism is a diet related to veganism that consists primarily of consuming fruits and possibly nuts and seeds, but without any animal products. Fruitarian diets are subject to criticism and health concerns. Okay. Vegan nutrition. A vegan diet is effective for reducing body weight. There is some weak evidence that a vegan diet is associated with a lower risk for cancer incidence and a trend for lower risk of all-cause mortality. While apolyprotein B is reduced, apolyprotein B, okay, not sure. Some weak evidence suggests that a vegan diet may have adverse effects on HDL cholesterol, triglyceride levels, and a higher risk for bone fractures. Persons with diabetes or high cardiovascular disease risk may benefit from improved measures of adiposity, total cholesterol, LDL, and improved glycemic control. A 2021 review found that plant-based diets can only provide a risk reduction for cardiovascular disease if a healthy plant-based diet is consumed. Unhealthy plant-based diets do not provide benefits over regular diets, including meat. A similar meta-analysis and systematic review also looked into dietary patterns and found that diets lower in animal foods and unhealthy plant foods and higher in healthy plant foods are beneficial for cardiovascular disease prevention. A 2018 meta-analysis of observational studies concluded that in most countries, a vegan diet is associated with a more favorable cardiometabolic profile compared to an omnivorous diet. A Cochrane review of 2021 looking only at clinical interventions or randomized controlled trials found that there is currently insufficient information to draw conclusions about the effects of vegan dietary interventions on cardiovascular disease risk factors. Most trials had a duration of less than 6 months. A 2019 systematic review found there is an overall robust support for beneficial effects of a plant-based diet on metabolic measures in health and disease. Vegans tend to have a lower body mass index than omnivores and lower levels of serum, cholesterol, and blood glucose. However, consuming no animal products increases the risk of deficiencies of vitamin B12 and D, calcium, iron, and omega-3 fatty acids, and sometimes iodine. Vitamin B12 deficiency occurs in up to 80% of vegans that do not supplement with vitamin B12. Vegans are at risk of low bone mineral density without supplement for the aforementioned nutrients. There is inconsistent evidence for vegan diets providing a protective effect against metabolic syndrome. Vegan diets appear to help weight loss, especially in the short term. There is some tentative evidence of an association between vegan diets and a reduced risk of cancer. A vegan diet without caloric restriction offers the same benefit in helping with high blood pressure like diets recommended by medical societies and portion-controlled diets. It reduces blood pressure better than a vegetarian diet. A systematic review and meta-analysis from 2020 looking into inflammation markers found that a vegan diet was associated with lower levels of C-reactive protein compared to omnivores. However, for other biomarkers, no substantial effect were observed. A 2021 review looking into the impact of vegan and vegetarian diets on physical performance concludes that research has failed to demonstrate consistent differences of performance between diets, but a trend towards improved performance after vegetarian and vegan diets for both endurance and strength exercise has been shown. Positions of dietetic and government associations. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and Dietitians of Canada state that properly planned vegetarian or vegan diets are appropriate for all stages of life, including pregnancy and lactation. The Australian National Health and Medical Research Council similarly recognises a well-planned vegan diet as viable for any age, as does the British Dietetic Association, British National Health Service, and the Canadian Paediatric Society. The German Society for Nutrition does not recommend a vegan diet for babies, children, and adolescents, or for pregnancy or breastfeeding. Pregnancy, infants, and children. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and Dietitians of Canada consider well-planned vegetarian and vegan diets appropriate for individuals during all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, and adolescence, and for athletes. The German Society for Nutrition cautioned against a vegan diet for pregnant women, breastfeeding women, babies, children, adolescents. The position of the Canadian Paediatric Society is that well-planned vegetarian and vegan diets with appropriate attention to specific nutrient components can provide a healthy alternative lifestyle at all stages of fetal, infant, child, and adolescent growth. It is recommended that attention should be given to nutrient intake, particularly protein, vitamin B12 and D, essential fatty acids, iron, zinc, and calcium. Okay. Sure. Nutrients. Vegan diets are high in fiber, folic acid, vitamin C, vitamin E, potassium, magnesium, and unsaturated fat. The American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics states that special attention may be necessary to ensure that a vegan diet will provide adequate amounts of vitamin B12, omega-3 fatty acid, vitamin D, calcium, iodine, iron, and zinc. It also states that concern that vegan and vegan athletes may not consume an adequate amount of quality protein. Okay, let's rephrase that sentence. It also states that concerns that vegan and vegan athletes may not consume an adequate amount of quality protein is unsubstantiated. So they're actually saying that that claim isn't backed up. These nutrients are available in plant foods with the exception of vitamin B12, which can be obtained only from B12 fortified vegan foods or supplements. Iodine may also require supplementation, such as using iodized salt. The AND, Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, has developed guidelines for vegan nutrition. Philosophy. Ethical veganism. Ethical veganism, also known as moral vegetarianism, is based on opposition to speciesism. Speciesism is a term used in philosophy regarding the treatment of individuals of different species. The term has several different definitions within the relevant literature. A common element of most definitions is that speciesism involves treating members of one species as inferior. Opposition to speciesism, the assignment of value to individuals based on species membership alone. Divisions within animal rights theory include the utilitarian protectionist approach, which pursues improved conditions for animals. It also pertains to the rights-based abolitionism, which seeks to end human ownership of non-humans, including as pets. Abolitionists argue that protectionism serves only to make the public feel that animal use can be morally unproblematic. The happy meat position. Donald Watson, co-founder of the Vegan Society, stated in response to a question on why he was an ethical vegan, if an open-minded, honest person pursues a course long enough and listens to all the criticisms and in one's own mind can satisfactorily meet all the criticism against the idea, sooner or later one's resistance against what one sees as evil tradition has to be discarded. On blood sports, he has said that to kill creatures for fun must be the very dregs, and that a vivisection, surgery conducted for experimental purposes on a living organism, typically animals with a central nervous system, to view the living internal structure. Vivisection and animal experimentation is probably the cruelest of all man's attack on the rest of creation. He has also stated that vegetarianism, while being a necessary stepping stone between meat eating and veganism, is only a stepping stone. Alex Hershaft, co-founder of the Farm Animal Rights Movement and Holocaust survivor, states he was always bothered by the idea of hitting a beautiful, living, innocent animal over the head, cutting him up into pieces, then shoving the pieces into his mouth. And that his experiences in the Nazi Holocaust allowed him to empathize with the conditions of animals in factory farms, auction yards, and slaughterhouses because he knows firsthand what it's like to be treated like a worthless object. Several animal rights activists, including Isaac Bashevis Singer, Gary Yurovsky, and Karen Davis, have compared the cruel treatment of animals in confined animal feeding operations and abattoirs to the Nazi Holocaust. Law professor Gary Francione, an abolitionist, argues that all sentient beings should have the right not to be treated as property, and that adopting veganism must be the baseline for anyone who believes that non-humans have intrinsic moral value. Philosopher Tom Reagan, also a rights theorist, argues that animals possess value as subjects of a life because they have beliefs, desires, memory, and the ability to initiate action in pursuit of goals. The right of subjects of a life not to be harmed can be overridden by other moral principles, but Reagan argues that pleasure, convenience, and the economic interests of farmers are not weighty enough. Philosopher Peter Singer, protectionist and utilitarian, argues that there is no moral or logical justification for failing to count animal suffering as a consequence when making decisions, and that killing animals should be rejected unless necessary for survival. Despite this, he writes that ethical thinking can be sensitive to circumstances and that he is not too concerned about trivial infractions. An argument proposed by Bruce Friedrich, also a protectionist, holds that strict adherence to veganism harms animals because it focuses on personal purity rather than encouraging people to give up whatever animal products they can. For Francione, this is similar to arguing that because human rights abuse For Francione, this is similar to arguing that because human rights abuses can never be eliminated, we should not defend human rights in situations we control. By failing to ask a server whether something contains animal products, we reinforce that the moral rights of animals are a matter of convenience, he argues. He concludes from this that the protectionist position fails on its own consequentialist terms. Philosopher Val Plumwood maintained that ethical veganism is subtly human-centered, an example of what she called human nature dualism because it views humanity as separate from the rest of nature. Ethical vegans want to admit non-humans into the category that deserves special protection rather than recognize the ecological embeddedness of all. Plumwood wrote that animal food may be an unnecessary evil from the perspective of the consumer who draws on the whole planet for nutritional needs, and she strongly opposed factory farming. But for anyone relying on a much smaller ecosystem, it is very difficult or impossible to be vegan. Bioethicist Ben Mempham and his review of Francione and Garner's book, The Animal Rights Debate, Abolition or Regulation, concludes that if the aim of ethics is to choose the right or best course of action in specific circumstances, all things considered, it is arguable that adherence to such an absolutist agenda is simplistic and open to serious self-contradictions, or, as Farley puts it with characteristic panache, to conclude that veganism is the only ethical response is to take a big leap into a very muddy pond. He cites as examples the adverse effects on animal wildlife derived from the agricultural practices necessary to sustain most vegan diets, and the ethical contradiction of favoring the welfare of domesticated animals but not that of wild animals, the imbalance between the resources that are used to promote the welfare of animals as opposed to those destined to alleviate the suffering of the approximately 1 billion human beings who undergo malnutrition, abuse, and exploitation, the focus on attitudes and conditions in Western developed countries, leaving out the rights and interests of societies whose economy, culture, and in some cases survival rely on a symbiotic relationship with animals. David Pearce, a transhumanist philosopher, has argued that humanity has a hedonistic imperative not to merely avoid cruelty to animals or abolish the ownership of non-human animals, but also to redesign the global ecosystem such that wild animal suffering ceases to exist. In the pursuit of abolishing suffering itself, Pearce promotes predation elimination among animals and the cross-species global analogue of the welfare state. Fertility regulation could maintain herbivore populations at sustainable levels, a more civilized and compassionate policy option than famine, predation, and disease. The increasing number of vegans and vegetarians in the transhumanism movement has been attributed in part to Pearce's influence. A growing political philosophy that incorporates veganism as part of its revolutionary praxis is vegan anarchism, which seeks total abolition or total liberation for all animals, including humans. Vegan anarchists identify the state as unnecessary and harmful to animals, both humans and non-human, and advocate for the adoption of a vegan lifestyle within a stateless society. The term was popularized in 1995 with Brian A. Dominic's pamphlet Animal Liberation and Social Revolution, described as a vegan perspective on anarchism or an anarchist perspective on veganism. Direct action is a common practice among vegan anarchists and anarchists generally, with groups like the Animal Liberation Front, the Animal Rights Militia, the Justice Department, and the Revolutionary Cell's Animal Liberation Brigade often engage in such activities, sometimes criminally, to further their goals. Stephen Best, animal rights activist and professor of philosophy at the University of Texas at El Paso, is an advocate of this approach and has been critical of vegan activists like Francione for supporting animal liberation, but not total liberation, which would include not only opposition to the property status of animals, but also a serious critique of capitalism, the state, property relations, and commodification dynamics in general. In particular, he criticizes the focus on the simplistic and apolitical Go Vegan message directed mainly at wealthy Western audiences, while ignoring people of color, the working class, and the poor, especially in the developing world, noting that for every person who becomes vegan, 1,000 flesh eaters arise in China, India, and Indonesia. The faith in a singular efficacy of conjectural education and moral persuasion, Best writes, is no substitute for direct action, mass confrontation, civil disobedience, alliance politics, and struggle for radical change. Donald Watson has stated that he respects the people enormously who do it, believing that it's the most direct and quick way to achieve their ends. Sociologist David Nybert of Wittenberg University posits that any movement towards global justice would necessitate not only the abolition of animal exploitation, particularly as a food source for humans, but also transitioning towards a socio-economic alternative to the capitalist system, both of which dovetail into what he refers to as the animal-industrial complex. Some vegans also embrace the philosophy of anti-natalism, as they see the two as complementary in terms of harm reduction to animals and the environment. Vegan social psychologist Melanie Joy described the ideology in which people support the use and consumption of animal products as carnism, as a sort of opposite to veganism. Exploitation concerns. The Vegan Society has written, by extension, veganism promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of humans. Many ethical vegans and vegan organizations cite the poor working conditions of slaughterhouse workers as a reason to reject animal products. The first vegan activist,
Donald Watson, has stated, if these butchers and vivisectors weren't there, we could perform the acts that they are doing. Could we perform the acts they are doing? And if we couldn't, we have no right to expect them to do it on our behalf. Full stop. That simply compounds the issue. It means that we're not just exploiting animals, we're exploiting human beings. Environmental veganism. Environmental vegans focus on conservation, rejecting the use of animal products on the premise that fishing, hunting, trapping and farming, particularly factory farming, are environmentally unsustainable. According to a 2006 United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization report, livestock's long shadow, around 26% of the planet's terrestrial surface is devoted to livestock grazing. The UN report also concluded that livestock farming, mostly of cows, chickens and pigs, affects the air, land, soil, water, biodiversity and climate change. Livestock consumed 1,174 million tons of food in 2002, including 7.6 million tons of fish meal and 670 million tons of cereals, 1/3 of the global cereal harvest. Paul Watson of the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society called pig and chicken major aquatic predators because livestock eat 40% of the fish that are caught. A 2010 UN report assessing the environmental impacts of consumption and production argued that animal products in general require more resources and cause higher emissions than plant-based alternatives. It proposed a move away from the animal products to reduce environmental damage. A 2015 study determined that significant biodiversity loss can be attributed to the growing demand for meat, which is a significant driver of deforestation and habitat destruction, with species-rich habitats being converted to agriculture for livestock production. A 2017 study by the World Wildlife Fund found that 60% of biodiversity loss can be attributed to the vast scale of feed crop cultivation needed to rear tens of billions of farm animals, which puts an enormous strain on natural resources, resulting in an extensive loss of lands and species. In November 2017, 15,364 world scientists signed a warning to humanity, calling for, among other things, promoting dietary shifts towards mostly plant-based foods. Reduction of one's carbon footprint for various actions. A plant-based diet in the study referred to lacto-ovo-vegetarian diet. Vegan diets are known to have lower carbon footprints. A 2018 study found that global adoption of plant-based diets would reduce agricultural land use by 76%, 3.1 billion hectares, an area the size of Africa, and cut total global greenhouse gas emissions by 28%. Half of this emissions reduction came from avoided emissions from animal production, including methane and nitrous oxide, and half came from trees regrowing on abandoned farmland, which remove carbon dioxide from the air. The authors conclude that avoiding meat and dairy is the single biggest way to reduce one's impact on Earth. The 2019 IPBES Global Assessment Report for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services found that industrial agriculture and overfishing are the primary drivers of the extinction crisis, with the meat and dairy industries having a substantial impact. On the 8th of August 2019, the IPCC released a summary of the 2019 special report, which asserted that a shift towards plant-based diets would help to mitigate and adapt to climate change. A 2022 study found that for high-income nations alone, 100 billion tons of carbon dioxide could be removed from the air by the end of the century through a shift to plant-based diets and rewilding of farmland. The researchers coined the term double climate dividend to describe the effect that rewilding after a diet shift can have. However, the researchers note that we don't have to be purist about this. Even just cutting animal intake would be helpful. If half of the public in richer regions cut half the animal products in their diets, you're still talking about a massive opportunity in environmental outcomes and public health. Feminist veganism. Pioneers. One of the leading activists and scholars of feminist animal rights is Carol J. Adams. Shout out if you've seen my other videos where I talked about the debate she had with Michaela Peterson. Her premier work, The Sexual Politics of Meat, A Feminist Vegetarian Critical Theory, 1990, noted the relationship between feminism and meat consumption. Since the release of The Sexual Politics of Meat, Adams has published several other works, including essays, books, and keynote addresses. In one of her speeches, Why Feminist Vegan Now?, adapted from her original address at the Minding Animals Conference in Newcastle, Australia, 2009, Adams stated that the idea that there was a connection between feminism and vegetarianism came to her in October 1974, illustrating that the concept of feminist veganism has been around for nearly half a century. Other authors have echoed Adams' ideas while also expanding on them. Feminist scholar Angela Dovnjak, probably pronouncing it wrong, stated in Joining the Dots some reflections of feminist vegan political practice and choice that she was met with opposition when she pointed out the connection between feminist and vegan ideals, even though the connections seemed more than obvious to her and other scholars. 2011. Animal and human abuse parallels. One of the central concepts that animates feminist veganism is the idea that there is a connection between the oppression of women and the oppression of animals. For example, Marjorie Spiegel compared the consumption of servitude of animals for human gain to slavery. The connection is further mirrored by feminist vegan writers like Carrie Hamilton, who pointed out that violent rapists sometimes exhibit behavior that seems to be patterned on the mutilation of animals, suggesting there is a parallel between the violence of rape and animal cruelty. Capitalism and feminist veganism. Feminist veganism also relates to feminist through the common critique of the capitalist means of production. In an interview with Carol J. Adams, she highlighted meat eating as the ultimate capitalist product because it takes so much time to make the product. It uses up so many resources. This extensive use of resources for meat production is discouraged in favor of using that productive capacity for other food products that have a less detrimental impact on the environment. Religious veganism. Streams within a number of religious traditions encourage veganism, sometimes on ethical or environmental grounds. Scholars have especially noted the growth in the 21st century of Jewish veganism and Jain veganism. Some interpretations of Christian vegetarianism, Hindu vegetarianism, and Buddhist vegetarian also recommend or mandate a vegan diet. Donald Watson argued, if Jesus were alive today, he'd be an itinerant vegan propagandist instead of an itinerant preacher of these days spreading the message of compassion, which, as I see it, is the only useful part of what religion has to offer. And sad as it seems, I doubt if we have to enroll our priest as a member of the vegan society. Black veganism. In the US, black veganism is a social and political philosophy as well as a diet. It connects the use of non-human animals with other social justice concerns such as racism and with the lasting effects of slavery, such as the subsistence diets of enslaved people enduring as familial and cultural food traditions. Dietary changes caused by the Great Migration also meant former farmers who had previously been able to grow or forage their own vegetables became reliant on processed foods. According to Ash L. Eldridge, an Oakland activist, the movement is about the black community reclaiming its food sovereignty and decolonizing the diet of black Americans. According to Shah, the area where most vegans of color feel the greatest rift with mainstream veganism is in mainstream veganism's failure to recognize the intersectionality with other social justice issues such as food access. PETA columnist Zachary Toliver noted he had often heard black veganism called a revolutionary act because it involves rejecting both family tradition and systemic oppression. Amira Mercer described it as revoking my own black card and said that for US blacks, choosing veganism was an act of protest against disenfranchisement by government healthcare and food policy. Politics and activism. In 2021, vegan climate activist Greta Thunberg called for more vegan food production and consumption worldwide. Parties like Tia Schultz Party in Germany and PACMA in Spain have pro-vegan agenda. They cooperate via Animal Politics EU. In the European Union, meat producers and vegans argue whether vegan food products should be allowed to use labels like sausages or burgers for vegan foods. The EU currently bans labeling with dairy-related words like almond milk, a rule instated in 2017. As of 2019, 6 countries in Europe apply higher value-added tax rates to vegan plant milk than to cow's milk, which pro-vegan activists have called discrimination. Demographics. In the United States, vegans, making up 2% of the population, tend to be middle class, white, female identified, educated, agnostic or atheist, and urban dwelling. In the below chart, polls with larger sample size as preferred over those with smaller sample size. Just breaking down the demographics. Prejudice against vegans. Vegan phobia or vegephobia is an aversion to or dislike of vegetarians and vegans. The term first appeared in the late 2010s, coinciding with the rise of veganism in the late 2010s. Several studies have found an incidence of vegophobic sentiments in the general population. Positive feelings regarding vegetarians and vegans also exist. Because of their diet, they may perceive themselves as more virtuous. They may get rated less masculine, but more principled. Vegan rights. In some countries, vegans have some rights to meals and legal protections against discrimination. The German police sometimes provides on-duty staff with food. After not being provided a vegan option in this context, a vegan employee has been granted an additional food allowance. In Portugal, starting in 2017, public administration canteens and cafeterias such as schools, prisons, and social services must offer at least one vegan option at every meal. In Ontario, a province of Canada, there were reports that ethical veganism became protected under the Ontario Human Rights Code following a 2015 update to legal guidance by the Ontario Human Rights Commission. However, said body later issued a statement that this question is for a judge or tribunal to decide on a case-by-case basis. In the United Kingdom, an employment tribunal ruled in 2020 that the Equality Act 2010 protects ethical veganism, a belief it defined as veganism that extends beyond diet to all areas of life and is motivated by a concern for animals. Symbols. Multiple symbols have been developed to represent veganism. Several are used on consumer packaging, including the Vegan Society trademark and the Vegan Action logo, to indicate products without animal-derived ingredients. Various symbols may also be used by members of the vegan community to represent their identity, and in the course of animal rights activism, such as a vegan flag. Economics of veganism. The 2014 documentary film Cowspiracy estimates that a vegan, over the course of 1 year, will save 1.5 million litres of water, 6,607 kilos of grain, 1,022 square meters of forest cover, 3,322 kilos of carbon dioxide, and 365 animal lives compared to the average US diet. According to a 2016 study, if everyone in the United States switched to a vegan diet, the country would save $208.2 billion in direct healthcare savings, $40.5 billion in indirect healthcare savings, and $40.5 billion in environmental savings, and $289.1 billion in total savings by 2050. The study also found that if everybody in the world switched to a vegan diet, a global economy would save $684.4 billion in direct healthcare savings, $382.6 billion in indirect healthcare savings, $569.5 billion in environmental savings, and $1.63 trillion in total savings by 2050. In his 2015 book, Doing Good Better, William McAskill stated the following, citing numbers from a 2011 book, Compassion by the Pound. Economists have worked out how, on average, a consumer affects the number of animal products supplied by declining to buy that product. They estimate that, on average, if you give up one egg, total production ultimately falls by 0.91 eggs. If you give up 1 gallon of milk, total production falls by 0.56 gallons. Other products are somewhere in between. Economists estimate that if you give up 1 pound of beef, beef production falls by 0.68 pounds. If you give up 1 pound of pork, production ultimately falls by 0.74 pounds. If you give up 1 pound of chicken, production ultimately falls by 0.76 pounds. Well, it looks like we made it, boys. We'll be back to go through every single reference and debunk every single one of them. Nah, just kidding. Yeah, I don't know. I might do a follow-up to this where we talk about some of the concerns and things that I might disagree with. But other than that, thanks for being here. We're going to wrap this up right now.